from as far away as that. Well, Mr. Parmar clipped a bit of our show when we were talking with John Rustad about the rehiring of nurses. BC is a bit of an anomaly on that. Healthcare workers. Bit of an anomaly whereby it's not welcoming these workers back who said no to the vaccine. So defend that for us. Why are we taking that stance in this province?
Well, let me start at the outset, guys, but thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Beaming in, not from Kelowna, but from beautiful Victoria, here at the legislature on the territories of the Lekwungen-speaking peoples, the Songhees and Esquimalt. I'm in my office in the basement, and we just finished question period, so I was really pleased for the invitation to join you. Look, during the pandemic, it was a hard time for all of us, all British Columbians, especially people in Kelowna and other parts of our province. It was a time where we were disconnected from the people we love. But what was really great was it brought everyone together. We had incredible leadership from our Minister of Health, Adrian Dix, even more incredible leadership from Dr. Bonnie Henry. And we led not only the country, but North America in our approach to addressing the pandemic and addressing the challenges with COVID-19. And what was really important was the driving factor in that was letting science prevail, getting politics out of the way and letting scientists like Dr. Henry make the decisions she needs to make. And so when I caught a glimpse of your interview with John Rustad last week, where he said very clearly that he would take our public dollars, the taxpayers of Kelowna, the taxpayers of British Columbia, and use the dollars that we need to invest in healthcare, the dollars we need to invest in housing and infrastructure to keep people moving, the dollars we need to ensure that we can make life more affordable and address the cost of living issues impacting so many people all across British Columbia, and give that to anti-vaxxers, had my head spinning in terms of what he had to say. And so this is John Rustad, a leader of the BC Conservative Party. And what's unfortunate is he has extreme views, and we are seeing Trump-style politics here in British Columbia from John and his political party.
I have a question for you, because we also interviewed Kevin Falcon a couple of times, and he's the leader of the official opposition, and he also stated that that we're literally and I think this is the quote, we're literally this one little spot in North America that's decided that we're going to continue to punish healthcare workers. And he's saying there's no science to back it up. And it is a question that even Kent and I talked. How is it just in this pocket of North America that we're still continuing to not allow these people to go back to work? Is there ever a path forward for these people?
Well, look, what I would say, Ken, specifically, and Jim, specifically around Kevin Falcon's comments, is it's hard to take Kevin Falcon's word because it shifts left, right, and center on a daily basis. Here's a guy who was in a political party, the BC Liberals, now the BC UP, who were supporters of the direction that Dr. Henry was going in. And now, because the BC Conservatives are eating their lunch based off of opinion polls, they're shifting their perspective. And it's not just that on this issue, but on a whole host of issues. Again, I think it's really important to ground this in science. And it is so important for politicians to get out of the way and for us to listen to people like Dr. Bonnie Henry and health scientists. They are the ones that make these decisions. They are the ones that are guiding our approach to dealing with the pandemic back in 2020 and today. And it's really important that we remember that we are here in British Columbia. We have specific challenges and issues here in British Columbia that are different in parts of Canada and around the world. And health scientists like Dr. Henry should be the one making these decisions, not John Rustad, not Kevin Falcon, not me.
I just have a follow-up question on that, though, because I agree with you on the science, and I believe that science is that should. But how is BC different then? Because in either, most of the United States and Canada have removed this mandate, and then we have some pressure too. Vancouver Sun did a story just recently saying, because it's the rural communities that are suffering the most, and it was most mayors are calling for an end to the vaccine mandates so they can get more nurses working. So they're feeling the pressure in their rural communities, and it's mostly the people that were let go were mostly interior and rural or northern communities. So those are the ones where it's really hard to get nurses and doctors to even go there in the first place, right? Do you know what I mean? Like you get out of school and you're just like, I don't think Prince George is probably number one on your list, right? It's probably Vancouver, Kelowna, or Victoria or something like that. So what do we say to those people in those northern communities?
What I would say, maybe just to add my perspective, Jim, is Prince George is a pretty cool place, and I would also add Kelowna is a fantastic place. I was there just this past week, and I can see it as a place where people would want to raise a family and go to school and get educated and so on and so forth and build a life in an incredible community. But again, what I think is really important when we are talking about healthcare is the need to hire more doctors and nurses, and we are doing that in record numbers. In the last year alone, 6,500 net new nurses, 700 net new doctors in our community. Again, the health scientists like Dr. Henry make decisions with regards to vaccine mandates and the whole host of decisions that have been made over the course of the last number of years since the beginning of this pandemic. And again, I talked to people in Langford, I was in Kelowna, and I talked to people in Kelowna. People acknowledge that here in British Columbia, unlike other parts of the country, unlike what we saw down south, we had a responsive science-based approach that led not only Canada, but North America. We have a lot of challenges with our healthcare system. The Premier and our government hear those in communities. That's why we are redoubling our efforts. We're investing more dollars into healthcare. We're hiring new doctors and nurses in communities all across the province. What brought me to Kelowna was the conversation on international credentials. You guys are probably privy to the stories that I have of people coming here to British Columbia with incredible skills, only to face obstacles, barriers, and challenges to get their credentials recognized. We have doctors in Kelowna right now that are probably driving taxis or working entry-level jobs that should be working in our healthcare system. Premier's tasked me to address that challenge as the Parliamentary Secretary for International Credentials. So we have a comprehensive approach to addressing the challenges with our healthcare system and recruiting and retaining healthcare workers in our hospitals and in our communities.
If I may, and I don't want to be too stuck in the weeds, but back on that core issue, whether it's a political decision or one you leave up to the professionals that run our healthcare system and the ministry, could you put into words what is the main guiding reason why they wouldn't rehire some of the people who left over that issue? What do you understand is the core reason?
Well, I will never be in a position, whether I'm an MLA or just a citizen, to say that I can speak on behalf of Dr. Henry, Kent. But what I will share and what Dr. Henry has certainly spoken about over the course of the last number of weeks and months and since the pandemic is the importance of getting the vaccine and how the vaccine protects people, especially those that are vulnerable. Again, I live with an immunocompromised grandmother of mine. It was very important for us and our family to get vaccinated, not only because we were protecting ourselves, but we were protecting her as well. And when you look at our hospitals, when you go to the hospital in Kelowna or in my community, when you go to Victoria General Hospital, we have people who are ill, we have people who are immunocompromised, and people who are super vulnerable. And it is so important that all of us that go to those hospitals, especially healthcare workers, those that are on the front line, nurses, doctors. I'm the son of healthcare workers. I've got a dad who's a patient porter that is all around Victoria General Hospital, pushing people around. It is so important, as Dr. Henry has said, that those people have the protection of a vaccine in such a vulnerable place like a hospital. And she's made that very clear. And again, we value her approach. We value her science-based approach. And we're going to continue to listen to her, unlike Mr. Rustad, who would love to spend money, our taxpayer dollars, on giving money to anti-vaxxers. And again, firing people like Dr. Bonnie Henry, which I would say the people of Kelowna are probably not very interested in.
Okay, so on this subject of international credentials, you are the parliamentary secretary, so you're right in on this. Are we making progress? Are we knocking down some of the barriers that have stopped some of the people that are driving taxis and getting them into the career they're trained for?
We're making lots of progress on this, Kent. I'm really proud of the efforts of our government and really not just our government, but social service agencies all across the province. I had an opportunity to be able to meet with folks in Kelowna, specifically at UBCO and Okanagan College, and talk about the challenges they faced with foreign credential recognition. It's why we introduced the International Credential Recognition Act. We're going to get rid of Canadian work experience. I've got some exciting news to be able to share with people across the province in the coming weeks about the work that we're doing to bring that legislation into force. We're going to, again, end discriminatory practices like Canadian work experience. We're going to lower cost. We're going to hold our regulatory bodies accountable. Again, we appreciate the independence that they have. We appreciate the level of profession, the high standard they need to keep for the profession, but we need to find ways to speed things up. And the stories I've heard of people like lawyers, met a lawyer from Brazil who's come here and worked in Brazil for over 10 years. And again, it has to be in an entry-level position, and it's going through so many hurdles just to get those recognized. So we're going to bring the act into force later this year, hope before the summer. And on healthcare, we've been making a lot of work on this even prior to the International Credential Recognition Act. And Adrian has shared with your viewers and people across British Columbia that we've got hundreds of nurses and doctors that are calling British Columbia and wanting to come here. And we're working with regulatory bodies like Doctors of BC to be able to speed things up and get them working in our hospitals and in our communities as quickly as we can, especially rural communities and interior communities where we know that there has been some considerable impacts.
Well, that's good news. And while we have you, though, I'd like to ask a different question.
Of course.
We're already in wildfire season. We're already seeing an evacuation. I think today was an evacuation in northern BC. And then Premier Eby said last year that local media, this is a selfish question, local media is so important to wildfire for the safety of communities, and yet we're still being blocked by Meta. And that's 2/3 of our audience that's being blocked in a small independent media outlet like us in Kelowna here. That is causing, like, even companies like BC Lotteries that used to spend a lot of money with us won't spend money with us because they say, well, when you get your Facebook back and your Instagram back, we're glad to work with you. But we don't have access to Facebook. Like, we don't know. There's no number for us to call or whatever. And Premier Eby did make it clear that local media is really important. Is the BC government, BC NDP, ready to step up and stand up for local media? Will you support us in either removing Bill C-18? Because we get zero funding from the federal government. But I mean, we don't really want the funding. What we'd rather have is our audience back.
Yeah, no, well said, Jim. What I would say, again, at the outset, a couple of things is, I was like so many people on the island and in the Lower Mainland, outside of Kelowna, watching in horror what was happening in your respective communities last year's. That was the worst wildfire season on record. And we, with the droughts that we're facing, are projected to be coming across this summer with the worst wildfire season on record. That's 2 years.
We got to start already. Like, it's already started.
I know. And we have such hardworking men and women on the ground putting their lives at risk to be able to protect our communities. And here you have a bunch of people, I don't know where they exist. They're probably not even here in Canada. They're probably in New York in their big fancy offices, telling people that KelownaNow and other important local outlets that are so rooted in their communities can't share valuable information. Again, I can't think of an issue that pisses me off more, and the Premier as well. And that's why the Premier has taken Meta, TikTok, Instagram, X or Twitter, or whatever they call it these days, to task on this issue. We introduced Bill 12, which I know some of your listeners might be aware of, that specifically focuses on a number of issues that we're addressing in terms of protecting young people from these social media accounts. The Premier has now assembled a table. All of these social media accounts are coming to a provincial table. Again, we're not leading the country on this. We're leading the world on this. And that table, the Premier and our Attorney General are specifically addressing issues of safety for kids and also addressing issues like what you've raised, where local outlets who provide so much valuable information on the ground, having the ability to be able to share that information in the case of emergency disasters like a wildfire. So I'm really hopeful and I'm optimistic we're going to be able to make some progress on this, and we're going to continue to hold them accountable, because what happened last year was completely unacceptable. And we're going to have to find ways to be able to support you folks to communicate out with people while still holding Meta and all of these others accountable.
I just want to stress how dire it is for media outlets. In our local market alone, we have seen one declare bankruptcy already. Another major national brand has laid off a bunch of employees. Another local, I'm not going to name their names, they've laid off most of their staff. Kamloops this week went out of business and named Bill C-18 specifically as the reason why they went out of business. There's a think tank in Toronto that said 38 publications have gone out of business because of Bill C-18. Somehow we need to force the federal government and Meta to the table to negotiate some type of settlement, because we are the ping pong ball in this thing and we don't have a voice in this matter.
Yeah, well said, Jim. I think there needs to be conversations, and we're certainly leading them from a provincial perspective to the best of our abilities on a number of issues, like the wildfires and like protecting kids. We lost Carson, and the premier made a commitment to his mom and dad, a young boy from Prince George, that he would take on these social media companies and protect young boys and young men like him. And we're really going to have that commitment from our premier and our government on those issues. And I commend you and KelownaNow and everything you do to be able to share the important things people in Kelowna need to hear on the issues that matter to them.
I mean, Kent's been doing this for, I don't know, I don't want to date him that badly, but Kent's been doing this for...
Started in the 80s.
For a long time, and he's worked with Global and CTV, and we have quite a few people. We have Steve McDonald, who's got 35 years of experience working with a major publication, as well as we have one of the most experienced newsrooms in the interior, with like the age of this young fella here. But to be silenced is tough, and I thank you for your support, and I hope that you guys put some pressure on the federal government and Meta. Because you seem to have the ear of Meta, because you just had them negotiate something, right? So,
right.
Okay, good. So can we move a little bit back to politics?
You go back to where you need to go.
Because I do think that I mean, what an interesting time as you become an MLA. Over that short amount of time, your chief political opponent has gone from being one party to looks like maybe the other one. And it starts to look like, as we head towards this next election, that your government is focusing a lot of its barbs at the Conservatives now. That's kind of, it seems to be kind of put the other guys on ignore, which probably bothers them. At the same time, attacking the Conservatives who have some of the policies which are the easiest for you to criticize. Am I right?
Well, let's kind of just start with the interview that John Rustad gave last week. It wasn't just the comments he made about anti-vaxxers. It wasn't just the comment that he made about a candidate that he had to quash because of the ridiculous comments they made on the island as a doctor that had their license removed. But let's talk about Kelowna and the fact that, again, we had wildfires impacting your communities all across British Columbia, and you have a political party in 2024 that wants to form government that very clearly doesn't think climate change is a priority. And I would question, based on the comments that John Rustad and Bruce Banman and their candidates have made, I don't think they believe in climate change. They don't believe in the science. And speaking to residents in Kelowna, I don't know how anyone could believe or trust this extreme Trump-style politics that we are getting from John Rustad and the Conservative Party. I think that is the thing that concerns me the most, gentlemen, is we are seeing this ugly, divisive politics down south in our communities, in communities like Kelowna with John Rustad and the BC Conservative Party. And we will have an opportunity this October to say no to them, to say very clearly.
Harsh criticisms, but you look at the polls, they're nipping at your heels right now.
So
well, look, yeah, no, for sure. Go ahead.
I have a question for you on wildfires, because it is such a central issue for people in the Okanagan, for tourism, for people's homes, for just in general. And we look around the valley here, and you can kind of see it in the background of where we're sitting here. There's a lot of trees, and with drier, warmer temperatures, obviously those trees become fuel. How much money will the NDP commit to wildfire mitigation? Because I know it's an enormous amount of need in that regard. How do we step up our mitigation and so that we can lessen the impact of interface fires on local communities?
Well, what I would say, Jim, is after the incidents of last year, the premier was on the ground multiple times in Kelowna and parts of this province, directly listening to people, people in Kelowna and other parts of our province around the challenges they faced during the wildfires. This is a nonpartisan issue. We listened to feedback from the BC UP, from the Greens, from the Conservatives, you name it. It's so important that when we are fighting these climate change disasters, that we are using science-based approach, but of course listening to people on the ground. And what I would say in terms of your question is we have been over the course of our time in government since 2017, but even more so recently, thanks to the leadership of my colleague, Minister Bruce Ralston, the Minister of Forest, investing hundreds of millions of dollars in organizations like the Forest Enhancement Society of BC to address that very issue that you speak of in terms of that forest mitigation. It's clear that we have to do a lot more. I remember being on a Zoom call just a couple weeks into September when I was relatively new as the MLA for Langford-Juan de Fuca, speaking to your local fire chiefs, to your local city administrator officials, local government leaders, the regional director, as well as a whole host of others, talking about what they had just experienced and how government could better address their issues. And again, it was just recently, I would say, in the last number of months, that we topped up funding to the Forest Enhancement Society of BC specifically to address that issue. But again, I have to say, it is so challenging and terrifying for your communities to be in that position. But again, to have a political leader in 2024 who just pushes this aside is ridiculous.
So last year during our wildfires, there's a lot of people, obviously armchair people, that get to second guess, but they really are second guessing the travel ban last year, that it was like a knee-jerk reaction, and it's hurt a lot of businesses that are still kind of reeling from that travel ban. Will the NDP take that into consideration, be more thoughtful in issuing like broad travel bans? Because most people exited the Okanagan at that time, and then the motels ended up being empty. And I'm sure you've heard all the stats about like the revenue lost and all that stuff. And then it was lifted, I think, a couple of days later, but the damage had already been done. And is there help coming for those people? Because I'm still hearing from people saying that they're looking for help, and then they've been told that to just go to their insurance companies. The insurance company says, don't look at us. And so they're kind of like, again, stuck in a kind of like a ping pong ball thing, right? Go to them, go to them, go to them. So, but they're also kind of desperate.
Yeah, great question, Jim, and absolutely. I remember my colleague Lana Popham, the Minister of Tourism, Arts, Culture, and Sport, being there in September and much through the fall, trying to drive up support and investment opportunities. You may have heard of. There's a country award. I'm not a country fan. Don't criticize me for that. But country music show that's coming to Kelowna very soon, and in hopes that those types of initiatives will drive investment opportunities and be able to support local businesses on the ground. But like you said very clearly, climate change is costing all of us. It's costing the people of Kelowna to see beautiful scenery tarnished by these wildfires. It's costing businesses. It's costing people their lives. It's costing them their households. And again, it is so important that we have a government that is addressing that. What I would say in terms of the travel ban and those that stayed in their communities, we've certainly listened. We've had lots of conversations on the ground with people. This wildfire season, we are going to be better utilizing the local contractors on the ground. I was, again, in Kelowna, and I had a great conversation with Todd Chamberlain of the Interior Loggers Association, and he shared with me that there are already contracts in place with many of his contractors that will be on the ground and ready and available to the wildfire service if they need it. But what I would say very clearly, and it's a very similar approach to healthcare, is we need to listen to our experts and our public safety experts. And when they tell you you need to leave, you need to leave. And again, I can't be more clearer than that. They are trying to save lives. They are trying to save their own lives. They're trying to save communities. And when you have people that stay where they are and don't follow those orders, they are not only putting themselves at risk, but they're putting all the people around them, and most importantly, our wildfire fighters at risk.
I just have a follow-up question, because I don't think I got an answer to it. Is during COVID, a lot of businesses, tourism business, suffered greatly, and then this wildfire obviously added to their, like they're trying to come out of it, and obviously they kind of got pushed back into it. and they're looking for help, is there something that the NDP is discussing in a way of some kind of assistance, like during COVID when they did get some assistance?
Yeah, look, our Minister of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation is on the ground engaging with local chambers of commerce, with community leaders to talk about those very challenges. We know that the pandemic still has had a considerable impact on businesses. We were leading the country in terms of our advocacy on benefits and trying to delay payment back of loans to the federal government. In terms of the approach the federal government took, we provided grants, not loans, over nearly $1 billion during the pandemic. And of course, in the case of these issues, we have been providing support. Prime example of that are the wineries, $75 million to be able to help replanting. And so what I would say, Jim, is we'll be on the ground, we'll be listening, and if there is a need for support for businesses, our minister will be on the ground listening and finding ways to be able to support people.
I know you promised us 30 minutes and we're in 35 already, so we do, Ken,
Yeah,
unless you have
no,
something else.
I'm pretty impressed. I think we went well beyond.
Yeah,
this,
and I thank you for your time,
enormous
and we
Hey,
hopefully we
anytime,
can get,
absolutely.
and we
Kelowna's
can
a great community. Thank you for everything you guys do. And I really appreciate the time to be able to come on here and talk a bit about the work that our government is doing. And again, correct the record of the stupidity that comes out of John Rustad's mouth.
And if you're in Kelowna, we would love to have you in studio so we don't have to fight with all this technical stuff. And we'd hope to have you again and other NDP MLAs on the show as well.
You bet. We're going to have incredible candidates in the next election, and I'm looking forward to getting out there and supporting them. And for sure, I'm hoping to be out in Kelowna again very soon to continue the conversation on international credentials. So we'd love to spend some time chatting with you more about that.
All right. Thank you for
Thanks
your
again.
time. And thank you
thanks
for
so much.
watching Kelowna Now.